This is Asian Insider, and I'm Nirmal Ghosh. Now, on the morning of November the 23rd, 2009, in Maguindanao province in Mindanao in the southern Philippines, a convoy was underway, carrying a lot of the family of a political candidate and a lot of other people, including a lot of journalists. And they were on the way to file papers for the candidacy of Ismail Mangudadatu, vice mayor of a town called Buluan, who was challenging a mayor of another town, Datu Unsay, called Andal Ampatuan Jr. Andal Ampatuan Jr. is the son of Maguindanao Governor Andal Ampatuan Sr. Now, Ismail was challenging him in upcoming elections for the post of governor of Maguindanao. That morning, the convoy was ambushed and everybody in it was killed. They were executed. The victims included Mangudadatu's wife, his two sisters, journalists, lawyers, aides, and even motorists who were just happened to be there and mistakenly seen as part of the convoy. The Maguindanao massacre, since known as the Ampatuan massacre, was the single deadliest event for journalists the world has ever seen. At least 34 journalists are known to have died in that massacre. Now, just a few weeks ago, on Thursday, December 19, in what has been called the trial of the century in the Philippines, a judge in Quezon City, Metro Manila, found Ampatuan Jr., along with several others, his relatives and others, guilty on multiple counts of murder. They were sentenced to life in prison. The verdict is being appealed, but it is also being seen as a ray of hope in a country that is exceptionally dangerous for journalists. At least 154 incidents of attacks and threats against Philippine media have been recorded since President Rodrigo Duterte assumed office in 2016. And the region Mindanao, of course, is especially dangerous, embroiled in conflict not for decades but for generations. But today we talk about the significance of the verdict with Maria Ressa, CEO and co-founder of the media group Rappler based in Manila. Maria, thank you very much for giving us your time. Really appreciate that.
Thanks for focusing on this, Nirmal.
Thanks. So, Maria, now how significant is this verdict? I mean, the massacre obviously shocked not just the Philippines to the core, but the entire world. Is this a watershed? And does it signal at all that the powerful political and feudal clans in the southern Philippines can actually be brought to justice?
I have such mixed reactions when you ask that. I guess, first of all, the one phrase, the more things change, the more they stay the same, right? I think, as you pointed out, it took a decade to get to decision, and part of the reason it was lauded was because many people thought that the Ampatuan family would actually get away with it, as they have for decades. But the reason why it was lauded is precisely because at least two of them were found guilty, and a decision was made. But here's the context of that. Those same types of practices, when politicians tell law enforcement to kill, these same things are still happening, and I would argue has gotten worse, has infiltrated the national levels in the Philippines, as you can see from what's been happening with U.S. moves to hold Philippine officials accountable for impunity in both the incarceration of a senator who is our former Justice Secretary, and for the impunity in the drug war, right? So anyway, sorry, a short answer for this is this should have happened a long time ago. Justice delayed is justice denied, but we in the Philippines laud it because it happened. And perhaps that's the biggest irony of it, is that we are so satisfied with so little, so late.
Yes, it is ironic. Now, your colleague in Rappler, Glenda Gloria, wrote a quite interesting piece the other day, saying that we should not forget the conditions that produce phenomena like the warlords, like the Ampatuan clan. They delivered votes, for example, for former President Gloria Arroyo, after all. And there is this nexus between national politics and powerful local clans. Is this going to continue? Because it's been the case for decades, right?
Yes, absolutely. And that was a really good piece by Glenda. But it echoes something that both the predecessor of Newsbreak, which Glenda was one of the founders of, and when I was head of ABS-CBN News, I wrote in 2009 a piece about warlordism and exactly the role that the Ampatuan clan played for President Arroyo during that time period. I did that for Amanpour, for Christian Amanpour's show. Again, I go back. the more things change, the more they stay the same. Unfortunately, these are the power dynamics, right? We are a democracy, faltering democracy now, since our institutions have essentially crumbled in the last few years, that is ruled by patronage and by local power groups that deliver the vote. What does this mean in the long term for us? It's hard to tell because so much is uncertain right now in the Philippines in terms of rule of law. And that's really the biggest challenge, right? The law should not be weaponized by those in power. We've certainly seen that happen in the past. The Maguindanao massacre, the Ampatuan massacre, is a clear example of that. And the fact that it took the Philippine judiciary 10 years. I mean, how much more blatant can murder be? CPJ within weeks immediately said that, looking at everything, the Committee to Protect Journalists said, looking at everything they had on file, this is the worst single act of violence, murder against journalists around the world. And look at that, 58 people in a convoy, very publicly driving down the road. They were taken by armed men, police, not military, but police with politicians. They were shot in broad daylight and then buried in broad daylight using a government-owned backhoe. How does it take a decade to bring justice, right? And then the other part, of course, is what about the people who stayed in jail for a decade who were acquitted? Isn't that unjust as well? It's a tough time for me to look. It's almost New Year, so I'm going to try to find a ray of hope. So yes, again, we lauded the decision because it happened, but many instances were worse off than we were a decade ago. This should have been condemned immediately, which it was by many in the Philippines and around the world. But we still haven't taken the right moves to make sure it doesn't happen again. And if anything, if you look at the context of the drug war, the Philippine police, the government, has already admitted that it has killed at least 5,500 people in less than 3 years of this brutal drug war. That's the number they put on record. Human rights groups put the number of people killed at much higher. At least 27,000 is the number, and that is as of December last year. So it's a tough time to look for a ray of hope.
Yes. I have to agree with you over there. Now, a lot has been written about the complicity of the police and the military in the Maguindanao massacre. I mean, the military, of course, had the Ampatuan clans as an ally in fighting local insurgent groups. And there were police involved in the massacre who've also been found guilty. What is the reaction out there from these two institutions, the Armed Forces of the Philippines and the Philippine National Police?
I mean, there is the public reaction, which again, everyone said this is a great decision that shows that the judiciary is working and that security forces are held to account. Conveniently leaving behind the idea that it took a decade to get to a decision. But I think the second part of that is that this relationship between power and security forces remain in place today, right? And that is part of the problem. Essentially, President Duterte's words allowing the Philippine police to kill, telling them that it is okay, that I have your backs. These things have pushed this high death toll that we're dealing with now. So publicly, we have a veneer of law and order, and the reality on the ground is much harder. And what we try to do is to shine the light as often as we can, as you are doing now. And I may sound a little too pessimistic, but part of it is I think I've lived through personal experience that shows how power is abused and how law enforcement is used for the political purposes of those in power.
Right. So coming to that, I mean, Maria, you yourself have charges against you laid by the government. You were arrested at the airport, I saw, and I was, by the way, at the museum in Washington D.C. Just today, and I saw your picture over there in a panel about threats faced by journalists, and your picture's over there, and there's a short write-up about Rappler. So could you tell us something about the charges against you, where the case stands right now, what is your position on that, and to extend it further, what is the state of affairs for the media in the Philippines now?
Thanks. That's huge, huge question. So I think, I'll start with 2018, which is the year that the Philippine government essentially filed a case a month against me and Rappler. In 2018, in a little over 13 months, I faced 11 cases and investigations. And then by 2019, this year that's just about to end, thankfully. In 2019, I had to post bail 8 times. I was arrested twice. In the Philippines, you can post bail before you're arrested, right? And in many instances, in order to remain free to travel, one charge alone had demanded a bail of at least $10,000, right? So this is insane. The charges that were filed against us fall under 3 buckets. The first is foreign ownership. That would be the reason for taking away our license to operate, which we're fighting and we're still operating. The second is tax evasion charges. And the third is cyber libel. So those are the 3 buckets. Where are we? Okay, so in 2019, one case has been thrown out, a case of libel, and 2 criminal cases against not just me, but also against the board of Rappler in 2015. Those 2 cases, the anti-dummy law, have been suspended. But we continue to fight. I've been going to court. There are weeks I've spent 4 days in court this year, right? And I'm supposed to be working as a journalist. And then, what I guess what we've seen is, unlike the Ampatuan trials, this case, the cyber libel case in particular, has moved at an alarming pace. Actually, alarming is probably not the right word. That's moved at the right pace. So we expect, I've been in trial since June, maybe this year, and then within 6 months, I expect by early in the first quarter, there'll be a decision on the cyber libel case. And then I think in that one, I face 12 years in prison, if the maximum charge. Collectively, all these cases, I face at least, I just got a note from our lawyers that they've counted everything again with all the new charges, and I can go to jail for more than 80 years. 80 years, right? So this segues to, we're going to get a decision on the cyber libel case, and the tax evasion cases, we also expect a decision by early next year. Really fast, and, hopefully I appeal to the judges so that they stick to the spirit of the law. And like in the case of cyber libel, that's been thrown out by the police's own lawyers. They threw it out at the beginning, and yet it was refiled. Where does it lead us, and how does this affect the way Philippine journalists work? I think you've seen in our case, and I think part of the reason the international community focused is the only defense journalists have is to shine the light. And I have been raising the alarm in the Philippines since 2016 that journalists are under attack. The first level of attacks are insidious, but American journalists are feeling it now as well. This is online attacks, exponential attacks, right? When accounts in many different ways on different platforms hammer the idea that a journalist is a criminal, Filipinos who don't know me other than the propaganda machine online now think I'm a tax evader, right? This is the propaganda war. So on the propaganda war, we're attacked online, bottom up. And that attack is insidious. It is on reputation. It tears down trust. And then those same attacks, just a year later, were echoed by the Philippine government in the cases they filed against us. So you can see these 2 ways of attacking journalists are are working together. And then, of course, the last one is, and this is where you have the Reporters Sans Frontiers, you have all of the latest reports about the Philippines showing how journalists are under physical attack, right? Safety. If you challenge power, there are consequences to this. Having said that, I don't want to end the year on a horrible note, because we are fighting. The hashtag we use is hold the line. We are going to demand rights that are guaranteed under the Philippine Constitution. Press freedom, like the United States Constitution, is part of the Bill of Rights here. It is the foundation of every single freedom that is guaranteed in the Philippine Constitution, and we're going to hold the line to make sure those rights are protected.
Maria, you've been going through a lot. You are going through a lot, but Happy New Year. I hope things look up for you in 2020, and thank you very much, considering your busy life. Thank you very much for spending time with us today.
It's good to see you again, Nirmal. You were here a long time ago, and
I was in the second half of the 90s.
I just hope we come out. I'm looking forward to 2020. 2020 is going to be a good year.
So the Ampatuan verdict has come as a ray of hope. But remember, as Maria said, the bar is relatively low in the Philippines, where it is very hazardous to be a journalist, to the point of even getting killed by your enemies. For Asian Insider, I'm Nirmal Ghosh.